you for coming to the What Can I Do with a Psych Major panel. My name is Lydia, and I'm here with Career Services, and this panel is put on by Career Services and by the Psych Department. And I just wanted to let you know a little bit about what's going to go on here. We'll start over there on the end with Brad, and we'll have our panelists introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they're doing, how they got there, all that good information. And when we get all the way down the line to Lisa, we're going to open up the floor for questions, and you can just ask away. So I think that's about it, and take it away.
Great. Good evening. They're letting the old guy go first because I have to go to bed at 7:30. So great to have you here this evening. I'm Brad Neary, class of 1981, St. John's, married to Benny, class of 84, and thrilled to have the opportunity. Was that a wow? Like he really is old, right? Looking forward to spending some time with you this evening. I've done these in the past, offered to share some of my stories, and I really enjoy it. And I know that I attended these when I was a student, and it was helpful to hear people's real-life experiences. So I'll take just a few minutes to tell you about my career trajectory and my psych major. I came to St. John's in 1977. Not with psych, not in my sights. I actually came up here to be, I don't know if you even know this guy, the next Dan Rather. Does that ring a bell? Dan Rather? Yeah, okay. Or Matt Lauer, if that's a little bit more of a little more contemporary for you. But came up to major in communications. And oddly enough, after my first year here at St. John's, they canceled the communications major and didn't reinstate it for a number of years. So I know it's a very popular major now, but it was not a major for many, many years. So I had fallen in love with St. John's, St. Ben's during my first year and decided that rather than pursue what I thought was my passion, I would stay at St. John's and I would pursue it kind of on the side. And I actually was a member of the news team at what was then called KSJU, the campus radio station. So that's how I got my fix, my communications fix for the next 4 years. But I had fallen in love with psychology basically because of a really terrific experience in Psych 101 with a really amazing professor, Carol Weidick, who taught here for many, many years, and just a really terrific professor, a great deal of respect for her. And I continued to have her for classes throughout the next 4 years. And decided that this was as good an area to study as any. I had friends studying econ, history, government, and I decided this is something that spoke to me and was impressed, as I said, with Carol and other members of the faculty, and decided that this was what I would pursue, and I would get a liberal arts education and study a number of other topics along the line, which I did, and I was very happy. I wouldn't have changed that. I was very pleased with the psychology major and augmented that with a number of business courses. I don't have a business minor because accounting and I are not good friends. So I didn't get the full minor, but a number of management and econ courses to kind of balance out the psych. So fast forward through 4 years with the psych major, was getting to, how many are seniors in the room? Any seniors? Getting to that point where it's kind of scary and you can kind of see the end of the road, and really didn't know exactly what I would be doing with a psych major once graduation rolled around. But I was very fortunate. In about January of 1981, and I was approached and asked the question, what are you doing in a few months after you graduate? And then they saw that kind of deer in the headlights look. And I was offered the opportunity to stay at St. John's and become assistant to the president of St. John's, which was one of those amazing opportunities that you never plan for, but when they kind of fall into your lap, you run with them as fast as you can. So I was assistant to the president at St. John's for 3 years, had an amazing experience in that role. Decided that wasn't going to lead me into being the president of St. John's at age 22 or 23. So I needed to find something else to do after those 3 years. I could have stayed in, obviously, for as long as I wanted to, but 3 years felt like the right amount of time in that job. I then took some time. I didn't do a study abroad program, but I took some time and backpacked by myself for 6 months across Europe. Which was an amazing opportunity. Write that down on your bucket list if it's not already there. And then came back and pursued a master's degree in industrial relations and human resources at the University of Minnesota. I don't know how many of you have looked into that. If human resources is of interest to you, it's a very, very strong program. Often the second strongest program in the nation. Cornell's HR program often takes first, and it's kind of that Avis, trying harder kind of situation with the University of Minnesota, but a very strong program. So graduated from that program in 1987, and again was fortunate enough to be hired by a large corporation in Cleveland, TRW, which was about $17 billion at the time that I left the company in 2003. A large automotive segment to the organization, a large space and defense, and a somewhat smaller information systems component. Joined them on what was a rotational program, kind of a high potential rotational program, to be perfectly candid with you. They brought in about 9 or 10 graduate students, or graduate degree holders, that they felt had the potential for senior level management down the road. And so I had a 2-year rotational experience with them, 4 6-month assignments as I worked through the company in 4 different locations, all in human resources. So there one executive compensation at the headquarters facility, a labor relations experience in a very gnarly kind of a Dickens-esque plant, and then a couple of different experiences out in California. Came off that program into a managerial program, into a managerial role back in that Dickens-esque plant in Cleveland, and was HR manager there, and then worked over the number of years from 1987 until 2003, held a number of positions with them, leaving the company in 2003 to come back here to the Twin Cities. The last role that I held was Director of Development and Organizational Effectiveness. And if I look at my career with TRW, which was 15 years in length, about half of the time I was serving in HR generalist roles, and half of the time I was serving in HR specialist roles, mostly in the leadership development and organizational effectiveness area. Came back here because my wife was pursuing a medical career, had finished her very long preparation in Cleveland, 4 years of medical school, a 6-year residency in urology. And we came back here because she was invited to join a private practice of urologists, Metro Urology in the Twin Cities. So she actually came back here, and because 10 years wasn't enough training, she had to do a 1-year fellowship just to kind of rub it in. So after 11 years of training, she became a member of the full team and became a partner then 3 years later. So when we came back in 2003, I knocked on a number of doors, knowing that I wanted to join one company in particular, and that was Medtronic. I actually wrote a term paper on Medtronic when I was your age for a human resources class. I went down and interviewed a number of folks at Medtronic, and I drove my buddy's car back up to campus thinking, I've got to work there someday. It's just one of those companies that kind of grabs you by the heart because of their mission and what they do. And 26 years later, I actually found my way into Medtronic and served there as Director of Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness. For 18 months, I was then asked to transfer over to a generalist role in our neurological business, and was then stayed in the neurological business and took a more of a sector-wide role, again, all in human resources. I was offered the opportunity, and I share this with you because I think it's important to keep in mind the kinds of things that roll out in one's life and taking advantage of opportunities. Was offered the opportunity to become Vice President of Human Resources for their spinal business, which is their second largest business down in Memphis. And I said no to that because it was more important to me at the time to be a dad. And I say that to the guys in the audience who might be dads down the road someday. I had a really awesome opportunity to, with my wife, adopt a beautiful little girl and be home with her for the first year of her life. And I get a little emotional talking about it because it's been a pretty remarkable experience for me, and I'm hoping it was a remarkable experience for her. But she came into our lives on day 2 of her life. We brought her home from the hospital, and I got to be home with her full time for the first year, which was amazing, really amazing. About the time she turned 1, a good friend of mine, a colleague of mine, the Vice President of Institutional Advancement at St. John's, Rob Culligan, was down for lunch. We were catching up. Now, Rob was actually my student worker when I was assistant to the president in my first year. So note to self, be nice to your student workers because they might be your boss's boss someday. So Rob and I were having lunch, and I said, someday I'd kind of like to return to the mothership. I think that my human resources career might be done. after 25 years. And I think that coming back to St. John's and working on the development team would be of interest to me. And I'm thinking when our daughter turns 5 and she goes off to kindergarten, he said, how about next week? And I said, no, Rob, I'm thinking about when Moira's, 5 or so. He said, yeah, I know what you're thinking. How about next week? And long story short, it was an opportunity that I applied for and was able to then land. And they made it a half-time job for me. So I started out working in development on the team from the Twin Cities, from our home office, on a half-time basis. That has crept up over the last 3 years to about a 2/3 time job. And it has been a way for me to blend doing good work with being a good dad and allowing my wife the flexibility to do what is a very time-consuming job as a surgeon. So it's been pretty remarkable, to be perfectly honest with you. And I think taking advantage of things that have come along my way that weren't planned by any means, but just felt like the right thing to do. And I'll talk a little bit more when we have a chance for Q&A about following your gut and your instinct, because I think that plays a big role in a successful and happy life.
Okay. Hi there. I'm Ellen Dehmer. You might recognize me if you've seen me around campus because I just graduated in May. So I have a little bit or a lot less experience. So yeah, about a year ago I was sitting in the same seats that you were and didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I was thinking along the lines of occupational therapy. So I went through my senior year psych major in the pre-occupational therapy program. Thought that was what I was going to do, so pretty much lived out my senior year planning on that. Applied to the program and got put on the waiting list. So I had to come up with plan B really quickly. So what I ended up doing was applying to the Minnesota Reading Corps, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm in a preschool and I'm a literacy tutor, so basically I just play around with kids all day and try and help them get the skills to learn how to read. Pretty crazy kids. But as far as my journey at St. Ben's, I started off as a biology major. I thought, I'm going to go into physical therapy, and that's what they're going to want to see, that I was a biology major, along with everyone else. And took some biology classes, a few psych classes, and realized, okay, biology is not doing it for me. I don't like studying for it. I don't like being in class. This isn't working. So looked at what classes I was actually enjoying and doing well in, and I realized that psychology was what I enjoyed. So I switched my major after thinking about it for a really long time. Switched it kind of late in my 4 years here, but continued on with psych classes and then eventually changed to occupational therapy. So I guess I can kind of give you the experience as far as if you're in your senior year, your junior year, how to plan ahead. Get to know your professors. So if you aren't sure about what major to do, go talk to career services, go talk to an academic advisor, talk to different professors. They'll kind of give you an idea and give you suggestions of what you're really interested in. So that's going to help you out a lot. And especially if you know your professors and you know the people in career services, it'll help you when you're going on to apply and you're writing a resume because they'll know you, they'll be a reference for you, and they'll be able to help you out. And yeah, just get to know them. If you're looking into volunteering, I don't know about all opportunities, but I know that there are quite a few different options that you can have. A lot of people choose to go abroad. I have a lot of friends that are going abroad right now, getting wonderful experiences there. So if you're kind of thinking about grad school, maybe just taking some time before you enter into a career, volunteering is definitely a good option. There are a lot of different things you can do. Like I said, I'm in a school, but you could be just about in any setting. Everyone is going to love having a volunteer, believe me. And it looks really great on a resume. So don't do like I did and kind of corner yourself into this is what I'm going to do. Give yourself options. And if that means going to the Career Expo on November 9th to go and to go and meet. I'll be there. That's why I know about it. Go there, go talk to people with different professions. Just pick up business cards. You don't have to do a lot. I mean, you don't have to be really formal about it. I mean, be professional, obviously, but go and kind of get some ideas, talk to different volunteer organizations. That's how I found out about the Minnesota Reading Corps and how I got set up with it. And if you have any questions for me, let me know.
Okay, I can use this one.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Okay, my name is Zach Schmitt, class of 2008. And I'm going to start off and talk a little bit about what I've been doing since I graduated. Then I'm going to circle back and maybe give you some suggestions on how to best use the psychology major from a career standpoint. So after I graduated, I became the psychology department coordinator here at St. John's St. Ben's. Did a lot of administrative work, took minutes at meetings, but I also got to teach classes and pursue some of my own research, which was great. That's a one-year position. After that, I realized that I've been in Stearns County my whole life, and I wanted to leave. So I went to Houston, Texas, and I worked at the University of Houston, and I did assessment research. So I designed research that delved into what students were learning, what they weren't learning in classes, and then recommended change based on the data to kind of shore up the curriculum, what they needed to do a little different to encourage learning in specific areas that they wanted to in their mission statements. From there, I just came back here. I just started working at St. Ben, St. John's in August, actually. And I'm currently the Assistant Director of Institutional Research. And I get a lot of questions about what that means, and I'm still not very sure. But I think it helps to visualize, like, St. Ben, St. John's, its students, its faculty. That's my research participant. That's who I'm studying, kind of. So I get a lot of requests from either the presidents or faculty members asking me things like, could you look at the students that are on academic probation? Could you design a survey or look at the data and kind of parse out common themes of those students, possibly recommend interventions and stuff like that? So really delve into the data. I got another question from Sociology Today, actually, asking me to do some research longitudinally because they instituted a curriculum change in 2005. So I have to design research to look at before 2005 and the change and then after 2005, and look at the data and see the change or the effect that curriculum change had. So that's what I'm doing now, but I'm still kind of figuring out what I'm doing. But my suggestions within the psych major are to really take some academic risks. And what I mean by that is we don't have 3 hours of organic chemistry labs after class. we have time to really delve into the major and figure out what we like and explore our interests. And for me, that was research and data. And I became a teaching assistant with Dr. Bacon. And I was actually able to fly out to New Mexico and present one of our papers at a national conference there. I was a teaching intern, so when you took intro psych, you had those labs, and you had a senior teaching that lab. I was one of those, and I was able to do an honors thesis to senior year. And those things were very, very challenging and daunting, and I knew they were going to be really hard. I knew I might not succeed at them, but I tried them anyway, and I'm really happy I did. I learned more doing things on my own, and I recognize that. And what I know about research now, I learned in that year and a half doing that honors thesis. And when I have a job interview, and I've had 3 now, I've never gotten a question asking me about a class or a test or something like that. I got questions asking me to explain what I did outside of class. And I think as psych majors, you have a lot of opportunity to do that. And if you're not interested in research and you're more interested in, clinical psychology, you want to work with kids, you got to make sure that you work with kids in college. Don't be that person who's a senior and wants to be a child psychologist or work with children, but never has. Go to Kid Stop and take advantage of the extra time that we have as psych majors. So that's my piece.
I'm Lisa Torborg. I'm a 1991 grad. Just was back this summer for my 20th class reunion, and folks will say to you it goes by in the blink of an eye, and it really does. It really does. Also married to a Johnny. As I was getting ready to leave the house tonight, he said, so you're going to go talk to the Bennies and the Johnnies, and you're going to tell them that you have both a master's degree and a doctorate degree from St. Thomas. And I said, yeah, I'll probably have to mention that part. I also had the good fortune, I think it makes most sense if I tell you what I do now and then maybe rewind and tell you kind of how I got here. But I had the really good fortune as well of having Carol Whiteck as one of my professors. And I remember being a senior psych major and saying to myself, I want to be like her. I want to be like her, or I want to work with her. And lo and behold, I joined a practice about 5 years ago, and Carol has been one of my partners. She most recently retired. But you never know how the world is going to turn out. And I remember thinking, wow, if I could do the work she does and be half as good at it as her, wouldn't that be a good thing? So, you know what? Set your aspirations high, because you never know if you're actually going to get there. As I said, I'm a counseling psychologist, and my master's and my doctorate degree are from St. Thomas. I'm in a small private group practice. We are in St. Cloud, called Processus Counseling and Consulting. We're 4 psychologists, a marriage and family specialist. We have a clinical social worker on staff and a psychiatrist that's with us part-time. And yes, my partners have been doing this for 35 years together. So I'm kind of second generation Processus is what I call myself. I do therapy. I work with adolescents and adults and geriatric patients. I work with individuals. I do marriage therapy and I do family therapy. I do group therapy. At this clinic, I really don't have a specialty. We're in central Minnesota, and so it's tough to have a specialty because we kind of see everyone. There's a need for folks who practice in this area to see the patients that walk through your door and get to know them and know how to treat them. So I have made a decision within the past 5 years to do that kind of work. I also do psych assessment. I do psychological testing. I do personality testing and intellectual testing. I'm also our clinical director, and in the past probably 2 to 3 years, I would say I spend a lot more time doing clinical director administrative work than psych testing, and I miss that. I don't have enough time. I have small children at home. And it takes a whole heck of a lot of time to prepare reports. And so I'm not doing as much testing right now as I have in the past. And it's because the job of clinical directorship, you all are so used to everything is electronic. I was trained to write my case notes with a pen and paper. And what that means is that over time, we have morphed through documenting via pen and paper, and then it was all dictation, and now it's all electronic. And that whole piece is my responsibility at our clinic, and that's kind of a big deal. It takes a whole lot to know what insurance companies want what from you with regard to documentation. And so That's just something that we have to be very careful and very wise about, and I spend a whole lot of time doing that. I still see 20 to 25 patients a week and do that kind of work, and I still call myself part-time. When I graduated, I was a double major. I was a music vocal performance major, and that was my first major. I knew I wanted to do some work in psychology, but I had been trained as a musician for years before I came to St. Ben's, and so I ended up doing both. And lo and behold, along the way, was told by many people I just really didn't have the personality to be the diva on stage, beating out everyone else to get the role. It just was not me. So I went to graduate school in psych instead and really made that transition my senior year. I thought I was headed to graduate school in music, and then really just did a lot of personal work and thought, what the heck am I doing? It's really not where I wanted to go. So when I graduated, I took a leap. Again, I grew up in this area and had led a pretty darn sheltered life. I felt pretty well taken care of here at St. Ben's. And so I had these 2 degrees from the private school, and I left the country to go work on a cruise ship for a year. I planned activity programs for kids, and literally I lived on a ship for about 8 or 9 months. And saw the Caribbean, saw much of the Mediterranean, and worked in Alaska for a while. And too, one of my interviews later in life, when I was hoping to get into the doctorate program at St. Thomas, that's what we talked about. They could care less. Everybody that applies has a great GPA, right? So what they wanted to know is, how the heck did you do that? So your parents, they get you through this private school, and then you just say, yeah, I'm going to go work on a cruise ship for a year. And that's what we talked about in my interview. We talked about things that were outside of academics. So after I did that, I came back and then got pretty serious. I had done a lot of work during my 4 years at St. Ben's doing volunteer work. I worked with Stearns County Social Services. I worked with developmentally disabled adults, and I ran some kid programs at the Y, and just really did anything I could kind of get my hands on to, so that I could be a good candidate for graduate school. That's really where I knew I was headed. When I came back from the ship, I took a job. I had to start saving money for graduate school, so I worked full-time nights at St. Cloud Hospital, which was one of the most difficult jobs I've ever had, including the one I have now. Worked full-time nights, and then I taught voice lessons as well, and worked my way through graduate school. Got accepted to the master's program and missed the cutoff. You could practice psychology, you could call yourself a psychologist with a master's degree if you had entered a master's program 6 months before I did. So I knew that I was going to get this master's degree, and I knew that to do the work I wanted to do, I was going to have to get a doctorate degree too. And that was just bad timing in life, I think. But as it turned out, when I got to the end of the master's program, I probably would have gotten the doctorate degree anyway. When I finished my master's program, I was really aware of all that I didn't know, and knew that I would have wanted the doctorate degree anyway to do the kind of work. So, gosh, into the master's program, I was able to come back here to St. Ben's, and I did my master's practicum work here for a year. Worked in St. Ben's St. John's Counseling Center, loved it. They actually hired me to stay on for a year. Someone was out on maternity leave, and I did that work for a couple of years. But then really couldn't manage that, plus the hospital, plus at that time I was starting the doctorate program and had three different years of residency programs that I did along with the program. So I wasn't able to kind of continue this work. I did my pre-doc internship with Park Nicollet Clinics in the Twin Cities. Which I learned a whole heck of a lot, but I also learned that was also not a good fit for me. We were trained with a psychiatry residence, which was incredible experience. It meant that we were doing medical consults and neuropsych testing on medical patients. That's a fabulous thing to learn. But it was also very much a program where you needed to see patients in about 10 sessions or less, and they needed to be a whole lot better, and you better figure out how to do that. And that also was not a good match for me. And so from there, I did a 3-year postdoc fellowship in a more long-term intensive therapy training. And then I really found out where I was supposed to land, because that was really a good match for me, and that's the kind of therapy I do now. Primarily, I'm sure a lot of you have learned about different theories of change, different theories of personality. And I do psychodynamic therapy, relationship-based therapy, and sometimes that takes a long time, but it's very satisfying work to me. And that's, gosh, in a nutshell, and I think Lydia's giving me the wink that we should open it up there.
Would you guys say it's impractical to have a psychology degree, just an undergraduate degree, and not go on to graduate school or a doctorate, like immediately? Not necessarily immediately, but like for the long-term haul, would it be bad to just have a psychology degree?
I don't know that it's bad. I think that you may naturally find that you're drawn into. I think those who study psychology are thinkers and enjoy the process of thinking. And I think that most of us have been drawn, or a number of us have been drawn into that just naturally. I do like this kind of, there was a former boss of mine that talked about kind of layering your career like a cake, that getting an undergraduate degree and then finding a few years of experience, whether it's in a volunteer setting or as I did in a university setting, and then going back for more education and just kind of building it that way, and even within a career, building your experience through different types of roles, even within the same organization. So it wouldn't surprise me that that may lead you into further advanced study.
Yeah, I agree with Brad. To do the kind of work that I do specifically, you have to have a license to do it. And there's very little of the kind of work that I do that you can do with a bachelor's degree. In the hospital setting, yes, because you're paired with a physician to do the work. But otherwise, you need at least a doctorate degree to do the work. Yeah.
I would add the work I used to be doing in human resources. One could grow into that from a bachelor's degree, but it's more difficult these days. Large companies like Medtronic are typically only hiring those folks that are coming out of a master's degree.
Could you do some form of counseling with just a master's degree?
Yes, you can. There are certain levels of licensure. For example, you can be a social worker and you can do clinical work. You can be trained as a psychotherapist and have a licensed clinical social work degree. You can also have a master's degree in psychology and get a license to be a marriage and family therapist. The reality of that is those folks are as skilled. I mean, I work with 3 of them, and do I see that I'm a better therapist to them? I would never say that, because I think that we all are very much equal in our work. However, to be paid for the work that you do, some insurance companies won't pay a master's prepared person. Yeah, and that's the darn reality of it. Yeah.
Being a psych major, I know that I don't know where exactly it comes from, but there's a lot of pressure to get a graduate degree right away. And I think that's a great option, but I would advise you to do a lot of investigation and preparation before you just jump in, because that's what's expected of you. Before I got this job, I was accepted to the U of M program, Educational Psychology PhD, and I talked to a lot of people that have done it. I've talked to the teachers, I talked to the students, and what they're doing and what they had to do during it, and I realized that at this point I wasn't as passionate about it as I needed to be to endure the 5 or 6 years and the long hours and the low pay. just really do your homework and don't jump into it because feel like you're expected because you're a psych major and you can't get a different job, because that's not true at all.
I can kind of piggyback on that. So I didn't say this, but I'm reapplying for grad school this year, and I'm actually changing my program. I'm looking into public health. So if I wouldn't have taken a year off, I probably would have jumped into occupational therapy, and who would have, I don't know if that would have been the right track. So there, like Zach was saying, there is a lot of pressure that I don't know where it comes from, but a lot of people think that they have to go to grad school the year after they get done with school here at St. John St. Ben's. But feel free to take a year off, go into some profession, try it out, volunteer for a couple years, for a year. Just try out different things before you get settled into a definite graduate program.
This isn't my experience, but it's my wife's experience. She went to Case Western Reserve University Medical School in Cleveland, and they pride themselves in attracting what they call bent arrows, people who didn't necessarily go straight through, and people who come from various very unique walks of life. She had professional actors in her medical school class. She had people who had taught English at the high school level. These were very bright people, and obviously went back and got what they needed to get from an educational standpoint in order to be accepted into medical school. But they saw these people as much more well-rounded than somebody who just kind of zips straight through from grade school to high school to bachelor's degree to master's degree to PhD, and saw them as better doctors.
I was going to say, I think I mentioned this earlier, but when I applied to St. Thomas for the doctorate degree, I went through 3 levels of interviews. And the third interview I went to, and I felt okay about the other interviews. And I went through the third interview, and they didn't ask me anything about, where do you see yourself in 10 years, and tell me about, theories of personality and theories of change. And really all they asked me about was, how did you pull that off? What else have you done in your life? Tell us what's interesting about you, and how did you pull that off? How did you graduate from St. Ben's and then decide you're going to float on a boat? And that's all we talked about. And I remember leaving the interview going, oh man, they were just being kind to me. Obviously, they're not going to choose me. And they really wanted to know, what else is about you that, if you're going to change your mind about something, we hope you've done that before you got to us. Because once we invest in you, you better be darn sure about this, is really what I felt.
I'm going to kind of add to that and say what Zach was saying earlier. If you are a psych major or pretty confident that you're going to be, challenge yourself in the major. Look into doing a thesis, an honors thesis, being a teaching intern. It makes a lot of difference. It adds a lot to your resume. In my experience, I did an honors thesis, and I was able to go to New York and present there. I presented at a conference in Minnesota here on campus. So it's absolutely added a lot to my resume. And at first, I was really hesitant about it, but Steve Stelzner was on my case and said, you're going to do this? And I said, okay. So I did it, and it's made all the difference. It's a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but it makes a lot of difference in the long run.
Yeah, I would echo that risk-taking is really important, and it's the kind of thing that people want to talk to you about later in life. What kind of risks have you taken? An example would be in my senior year, you might be familiar with the peer resource program on campus, and it's different than it used to be. It seems to be morphed into kind of more of an outward-bound type of program, which sounds terrific, but it was really more of a pre-professional program, and we worked closely with Carol and Nita Jo Finn and a number of the folks that were in the counseling center, and we kind of helped students deal with things prior to their having a full-blown need for someone like Lisa. And so we were facilitating divorce and separation workshops and study workshops and a number of things. And I was, along with a colleague of mine, the first student co-coordinators of that. And our senior year, we saw that there was a conference that came up. It was down in New Orleans, and it was National Conference on Student Services. I think that was the title of it. And we were reading the pamphlet, and we said, well, we should be speakers at that. Here we are, seniors in college. We should speak. And so we literally got on the phone and we called the director of this organization. Just directly called him because that's what you do, right? You pick up the phone, you call somebody. And he answered, and we told him who we were, and we said, we really would like to present at your conference. And we did. We were flown to New Orleans, and we presented we did our drug, we had kind of a funky name for it. I've forgotten it now, but it was a substance abuse workshop that we did on campus. So we did that at the conference, and then we put together another session that was about how we pulled this peer resource program together, the birth of the program. And I'm happy and kind of amazed to tell you that we got the feedback back that out of the entire conference, our 2 sessions scored the highest. And these were PhDs that were presenting to people. And here we were, just a couple of college kids that called this guy and said, we want to come to New Orleans and talk about what we do. So take risks and push the edge. Push the edge of the envelope. You wouldn't be in this room, you wouldn't be at these schools if you weren't bright, articulate, eloquent, risky, cool people. And so take full advantage of that and just push it a little bit. And quiet.
I think we scared them. I hope we didn't scare you.
Why don't you each tell us what you did today? How you spent your day?
Should I start?
Go for it.
I got up at 6:30, made my daughter's bed, packed her lunch, made her breakfast while my wife got ready, and then they went off to preschool. I spent the morning, I made a call to try to raise big bucks for these places, basically in major gifts fundraising for St. John's. I then got a call from an alumnus out in Portland, Oregon, who had offered to host an event at his home for Portland area alums that's coming up in about a week and a half, and told me he's unable to do that. Surprise. So I was scurrying around trying to find another venue for an alumni reception out in Portland, Oregon in a couple of weeks. I also serve on the board of directors of St. David's Center, which is a wonderful place in the Twin Cities where our daughter goes to preschool, but it's also, as I was telling Ellen, just an amazing place that offers pediatric therapies and has for 51 years in autism day treatment, occupational therapy, physical therapy, etc. So I spent 2 hours in a capital campaign meeting as a member of the board of directors, and then I was thrilled to be able to pick up my daughter at 2:45 from preschool, and we played until I needed to jump in the shower to make my trip up here.
All right, well, I got up at 5 a.m., which was really fun. And then I went to school, got things organized for my kids. So I have 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and they speak English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Russian. Basically, you name a language, they speak it. A lot of them don't speak English. So trying to chase them around and give them some kind of instruction. We're working on letters and colors and shapes. So trying to figure out a way so that the kids that understand it aren't bored, and the ones who have no idea what I'm saying actually learn something. So I find myself repeating things about as often as you can, telling them to use their words and their manners and things like that. So I don't even know. Played with that group, and then they were rambunctious, so another group came in and they were just as rambunctious. So a lot of what I do is pulling them aside, reading stories to them, doing different writing activities so they can see me write and see how that all works. Mm-hmm. And like I said, working on letters. Really fun. Oh, you have yours. Or unless you want this one.
Yeah, no, that's all right. That's a good point. Well, having just got back to the state, I live with my parents, so I woke up in my parents' basement. My mom made breakfast.
Did your laundry.
Which was awesome. I'm working on that. I'm trying to remedy that situation. But I came to work, and I generally take about an hour or two to kind of poke around with some research ideas that I think would be interesting or beneficial to college. And this morning I was working on feelings of students being overwhelmed by academic work, and how that relates to academic achievement and how much is too much. So we'll see. I'm still working on that, but then I started doing real work that I was assigned, finishing a report on who our new students are this year, kind of academically, personally, their values, that sort of thing. Then, jeez, I did some other things. I don't know. But I generally, it's really cool getting to just come to work and being able to kind of poke around and do your own thing with research, and I feel really lucky to do that.
I was laughing because your day sounds so unstructured. You structure it. When I show up at the clinic, I know exactly what I'm doing at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. And then from 12 to 1, I'm going to get as much done as I can. And I know who I'm going to see at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. There might be a cancellation, and somebody else might come from my cancel list but go in my schedule. But sometimes it's astonishing to me. My husband is self-employed, and he doesn't know what he's going to be doing from 10 minutes to the next 10 minutes. And that's what's unique about my work. I mean, there's very little variation in when I show up, I see patients all day. That's what I do. So that's what I did today. On days like today, I start later so that I can typically work later. We are a clinic that provides evening appointment times, so today I started later, so I'm able to take the kids to school and be home with them in the morning. And I get to walk my dog before I go to work on Tuesdays, and then when I get there, it's structured, it's scheduled. You hope that somebody's running late, because wow, then you might get to chat in the hallway if somebody else's door is open. We try to run our appointments on the hour so that we're all free for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, all at the same time. And I'm an introvert, I mean, I work with people all day long, but I'm an introvert. And so I don't need to have crowds of people around. And if I can check in with one of my colleagues for 3 minutes, I'm good. I'm satisfied, So it's very, very different. My day is very structured when I'm at work. And I work part-time, so now on my days off, I mean, I do lots of volunteer work at my kids' schools. It's important to me. I mean, being a mom is as important to me as being a psychologist. And that's something that I feel, one of the reasons why that doctorate degree was so important to me, because I want to be able to say when I'm coming to work, I don't want to have to work in the middle of the night. I did that for a lot of years, and it just really matters to me that I can be a parent and do my work. So yeah, on my days off, it's not structured, believe me. I mean, I do lots of other fun things, but on the days that we work, that's how it runs in a small clinic like ours. It's very important if you're choosing a master's or a doctorate degree in psychology to choose a school that's APA approved, APA accredited, fully accredited. And some schools are and some schools aren't. And so I limited my search to APA accredited schools. And then I knew I wanted to stay in Minnesota, because by the time I was headed to the doctorate program, I was married, and my husband is self-employed, and his business is not movable. And it just would have been really tough to do the program, us living a few states apart. I just knew that I wasn't going to sign up for that. So I limited my search to APA approved, APA accredited, and then I knew that I wanted to be in Minnesota. And that wasn't very wise. I felt like it really put the pressure on myself. I mean, I was either going to get in at the U and get in at St. Thomas, or I probably wasn't going to go. I wouldn't recommend that. I would widen the search.
During the 3 years that I was in the president's office, we had a transition after the first year, actually, from Father Michael Blecker's last year to Father Hilary Timish. And when Father Hilary came into the president's office, he came from the English faculty, and it was kind of a shock to his system. And he found he wasn't utilizing me as his executive assistant the way Father Michael had. And he saw this, and he said, "I'm underutilizing you. Would you be interested in doing it half-time and doing something else half-time?" And so that other half-time job was assistant director of what was called then personnel services, so the human resources function for the university. So I juggled those two half-time roles for about 7 months until he got his feet squarely on the ground and he screamed, "Come back here full-time." And so I did that and finished out my career again in the president's office full-time. But it wet my whistle for human resources. I'd heard enough about the U's program through career services and such, and there was a real pipeline of St. John's and St. Ben's students who had always been funneling from here down to that program. So it became, very interesting to me, and I did some talking to folks who'd been through the program, and it just felt right. It felt like the right kind of a way to apply my psychology and business experience, and so then I looked at the strongest programs, those being both Cornell and the U of M, and applied at both, was accepted at both, but decided that Cornell is a beautiful spot in Ithaca, New York, if you like deer and fox and that type of thing. But as far as internships and part-time jobs, not an easy thing to find in Ithaca. And so the fact that we have the second best program in your backyard in a metro area where you've got all sorts of alumni connections, it just made a lot of sense to me to pursue the studies at the U of M. And I wouldn't have changed it. Very, very pleased with the way that turned out.
I can touch on that. I didn't end up going, but I did a lot of searching, so I can touch on it a little bit. If you can, I would recommend throwing out geography, as they said, and throwing out any preconceived notions about the overall reputation of the school as a whole, because specific graduate programs within the school can be at the top of their fields. For instance, educational psychology, University of Wisconsin and U of M are ahead of Harvard. So kind of throw away those, and then finally look for, if you're into academic research, look at specific people like professors and what they're studying, and kind of throw out everything else. And if you're interested in that, search out those people, because that's who you're going to be working with most likely for 6 years, and that's what you're going to be working on. So you've got to make sure that your interests and his or her interests are matching. So that's what I would recommend.
I think we're just going to wrap it up now. If you have any final questions, feel free to stop up after. I'd ask that you turn in your evaluation sheets at the very end, and thank you very much for stopping in.